Interrogation techniques often include methods used by law enforcement agencies to obtain confessions and relevant information from either suspects or witnesses, which respect legal standards while dissecting the truth, and often build a degree of trust and connection with the person being interrogated during the interrogation process in order to better obtain more accurate information. Today we have two very special and interesting cases, one being the Chris Watts family murder case, and one being the murder of Sherry Robinson. Both of these cases possesses both good and bad of how the agents perform on their interrogations. There are methods that are very effective and methods that might have been not so effective to certain people. And now we would like you to join us and dissect the different techniques that the agents use in these two different cases. Our first case is the Watts family murder. Chris had a lovely family that included his wife, Shannon Catherine Ruzek, his two daughters, Bella Mary Watts and Celeste Catherine or Cece Watts. Bella being 4 years old and Celeste being 3. Shanann also had a 15-year-old baby, Nico, when being murdered. Chris buried Shanann's body in a grave near an oil storage facility and dumped his two daughters into an oil tank. Watts remained innocent until he admits that he had murdered his family and was later on arrested. Now let's get into details on what happened in the interrogation that made Chris to confess his murder. If the interrogation was planned and performed well, then the suspect would very likely to confess due to the pressure from the police. At about 1 minute 10 seconds into the video, you can see that when two interrogators enter the interrogation room, the seats of the two police officers are symmetrical to the suspect. This symmetry and symmetrical perspective can create a hostile atmosphere for the suspect. At the same time, the two police officers were also in tandem. The female police officer leans forward while the male police officer leans back, with a look of impatience in his eyes. At the same time, the female agent can give the suspect the illusion of being easy to communicate with, so having the female police officer to calm Watts' emotions can be very significant. In the following minutes, they maintained the same position. The female officer was closer to the suspect, while the male officer continued to stare at the suspect and said some comforting words. For example, at about 1 minute and 22 seconds in the video, when the suspect gradually becomes nervous and declared that he would not lie, the male police officer would then comfort him.
I feel like you're probably ready to do that.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise.
Chris,
I know.
Chris, stop. It's time. Just stop for a minute. Take a deep breath.
This approach can effectively relieve the nervousness of the agents. Because when people are in extremely nervous and fearful mood, they often do not have the ability to differ effective information. Immediately afterwards, the female police officer hinted at the reason for the suspect's discomfort and showed that she was very understanding and also showing empathy.
I want you to take a deep breath right now.
There's a reason you feel sick to your stomach. And when people hold stuff inside, it makes you physically ill. And I can just tell on your face, I could tell from the second you walked in that you were wanting to just come clean and just be done with this. And I appreciate that because you knew sitting down in that chair that you weren't going to pass today. And you knew I was going to find out because I told you that. And then you continued to stay knowing that you could, at the end, say, you know what, I just need to get this off my chest. Like, I just need to tell you what happened.
At the same time, she says it in a very guiding tone. The female police officer here gave the suspect psychological hints, providing the reason why he feels uncomfortable now is because he did not tell the truth. Convey secretly to the police officer, and when he speaks his inner thoughts, he will be fine. When the female police officer started to get to the point, explaining that they were not here to play games, no trick, he just needed to understand the ins and outs of the whole thing. In the subsequent exchanges, the female police officer kept giving psychological hints to the suspect, stating things like, I know you want to tell us, I can see it in your face. At 5 minutes in, we can see that Chris Watts did not have many emotional changes about the death of his wife and child. He did not show pain or remorse, but said in colder, more rational words, "If I could have my babies back home right now, I would. I want them back. I want everybody back."
Honestly, I do not know where they are at. If I could have my babies back home right now, I would. I want them back. I want everybody back.
At 14 minutes and 32 seconds, the male police officer stated that based on the information they had, their communications, he stated that his wife had a very controlling personality. The female officer, while stating that she was the one who went through the divorce process, and when he was the one who was more responsible and tried to take care of the people he loved. Therefore, he wanted to get to Chris Watts' love for his wife, more perspective on whether he had a motive for murder based on his reaction to his wife. After hearing Chris Watts once again states that he did not know where the child is, the police immediately changed the subject and began to discuss what happened that night.
And we know that there's an Alexa in your house,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that those are trained to record distress.
Okay.
You know that we know the content of Nikki's text messages and your text messages and Shanann's text messages. Okay?
I didn't know you knew who Nikki was until tonight, right now, so.
Okay. Tell us about that night again, and please tell the truth this time.
I told you the truth. I promise I've told you the truth. Like, I woke up at 4 o'clock.
Until 20 minutes, Chris Watts kept saying that he didn't know what happened, and two policemen kept pressuring him. Then Watts kept explaining that he did nothing to his wife and children. Here, the two policemen, their emotions were exposed a little too early, and their words included full of hostility and purpose. This made the agents more worried and subconsciously believe that this is a sign of danger. Their intentions should have been revealed a little later, and their theme would cut a little too quickly. If there were more foreshadowing words, it might have been a better effect. When the interrogation reached its 36th minute, they made no further progress on the matter. They used another technique, which was to let the interrogated further conduct questioning while they left the interrogation room first. This can be effective. Reduce the psychological pressure of the interrogated person. Since Watts have been pressured by the two police officers and he will not disclose relevant information to the two policemen, letting the suspect's father during the interrogation might have been a better choice. After the two policemen returned to the interrogation room, their communication became a lot smoother. When the interrogation progressed to 51 minutes, we can find that the suspect's father had some physical contact with the suspect. He put his hand on the suspect's shoulder, which can effectively relieve the suspect's nervousness. At the same time, we can notice that the positions of the two police officers are side by side and opposite to the suspect and his father. While the father is comforting, it also puts some psychological pressure on Watts, which seemed to tell him, "We're not easy to fool." At the end of this case, Chris was sentenced with 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The murder of Shuri Ramusin is a very interesting case that involves a former police officer committing murder but being caught a stunning 23 years later. Back in February 24, 1986, the body of Shuri Ramusin was found in her and her husband John Rutan's condo. Back when John was a mechanical engineering major student in UCLA, he dated a girl named Stephanie Lazarus that also studied in UCLA and majored in political science. But soon after, Stephanie and John eventually did not have things work out, which resulted in them breaking up. John had then married Shuri Ramusin later in 1986. Shuri was then found murdered just in 1 year after she and John had married. This case remained unsolved until in 2009, Due to Shuri's father's request, the case of Shuri Ramusin's murder was brought back to attention. Police had then found a DNA match with Stephanie's cup and the bite mark on Shuri Ramusin's body. Now let's get into the interrogation video of Stephanie Lazarus. Throughout the interrogation, Stephanie showed a lot of facial and exaggerated expression to hide her nervousness. She would often answer agents' questions with, "I may have," "I might have been," or things like, "I can't remember," due to it being 23 years ago.
It might be, something, you're married to someone else, obviously, and so forth, and that you may not want to, talk about these things in that setting where someone, we don't want the rumor mill or gossip or any of that kind of stuff to start.
That's fine.
So we did this just as a means to try and speak to you in just a confidential place where where your business isn't out there for other people in your division to know about.
God, that's been a million years ago. What year is it now? 2009? I graduated in 82, yeah.
These type of answers are the safest among courts. Lawyers will often ask their clients to answer interrogation questions with unsure statements too. From the start of the video, Stephanie did not know what the agents were trying to talk to her about, so she was leaning in to show her interest in this conversation. But later on, until one of the agents finally asked Stephanie if she knows Shuri Ramusin. At this point, Stephanie knows what this conversation is about. She then leans back and loses interest and eventually gets into a defensive mode. One of the agents starts the question of, "Do you know her?" Then into, "Have you seen her?" And eventually into, "Do you know who she is?" Notice that Stephanie does not think in silence, but instead she repeats, rapidly. In forensics linguistics, this technique is called discourse marker, and this is to show her enthusiasm in this conversation. Throughout the whole interrogation, the two agents do not put a lot of pressure on Stephanie, and we think that this is because of two reasons. First of all, Stephanie is also a police officer, or even a higher ranking police officer than them. Second reason is that the two agents do not think it's time to put pressure yet. Until, in 23 minutes into the video, Stephanie panics, and this is also where the police made a mistake. This is the right and the best point for the agents to put pressure on Stephanie, but instead they try to calm Stephanie and gives her a break, missing a good chance for more information. From 56 minutes, Stephanie showed multiple facial expressions that when we see, we may think it's too much. The agents ask her if she remembers what car John drove back when they were dating.
Well, yeah,
Do you remember what he drove?
Well, I know at one time he drove either a 240 or 260Z.
Any other cars that stand out in your mind?
I don't know how long he drove that 240 or 260Z for. And the only reason I say that is because I think I may have a picture of it with him in it.
What kind of car did you have back then?
Let's see. What year?
Or are you like one of those young cops that like, I got a paycheck and bought a new car?
Oh, no. I've only had like a few cars in my whole life.
So what'd you have when you came on the job?
Okay, well, my first car was a 68 Chevelle. 68 Chevelle.
Stephanie now knows where this question is trying to go, and this leads her to do something called deception management. This means that when a person is trying to lie, he or she would try to cover their facial or body language while lying. The two agents did not perform a lot of techniques when questioning Stephanie. They often use building up questions and things to close up the relationship with Stephanie. Now, obviously, Stephanie knows exactly what the two agents were trying to do, which means that she could use different methods to solve different technical issues. At the end of the interrogation, the two agents did not get any useful information. But this is not because of the two agents' poor performance, but mostly because of Stephanie also being a police officer. and has more experience than the 2 other agents. But at the end, they did have enough DNA evidence to sentence Stephanie with 27 years in prison. Interrogation techniques is a very specific topic and can go into further detailing. The most effective interrogation techniques vary from suspect to suspect and based on how much evidence is being controlled. For example, the strategic use of evidence and the raid techniques are all effective techniques that can earn us more information from the suspect and effectively gather information that would help us on a certain case.